Dive. Today, we're doing a really close examination of how a story gets built, how its foundations are laid. We're going to be tackling a critical analysis of just Chapter 1 of the novel Donker. So if you're someone who appreciates the architecture of a narrative, this is definitely for you.
Yeah.
Our mission here is to really zoom in on how the author uses trauma and guilt and even the physical setting, all in the very first chapter, to build the entire psychological world of the book.
Exactly. It's less of an introduction and more of a blueprint.
A blueprint, I like that.
Yeah, and the analysis shows that right from the get-go, this chapter is just saturated with the core themes. I mean, you've got loss, this really pervasive guilt, emotional paralysis, and the immense psychological weight of making a choice that's ethically right, but personally devastating.
Okay, let's unpack that, because the opening it's quite jarring. The chapter doesn't start with Greg, our main character. Instead, the analysis points to this really shocking opening image. It's the recovery of a body from the Grand Canal in Venice. So why start a story about a South African family tragedy so far away in such a public place?
Well, the placement of that image is so intentional. It's a psychological primer, really.
A primer?
Yeah, the source material argues the author is preparing you, the reader, for a narrative that's going to be shaped by death and what the critique calls emotional drowning.
The water.
The water. Venice is this beautiful city defined by water, but here it's where life ends. It introduces this theme of collapse right away.
So it's sort of giving the personal pain a universal scope before we even meet the characters.
It absolutely is. And you know, in great writing, these opening images are almost never random. They establish a symbolic language. In this case, it's water, depth, loss, and that's going to echo through the whole book.
And then, right after that very public tragedy in Venice, we're pulled into this hyper-private world. We shift completely geographically and emotionally to Greg's home in Sandhurst. And the analysis says the house feels empty and emotionally heavy.
And that's the connection. That's the author linking the external world to the character's internal reality. The atmosphere of that house, the emptiness, the silence. It's a direct mirror of Greg's own internal state. The setting makes his turmoil feel tangible.
And the house feels heavy because Greg himself is carrying this impossible weight. His central conflict is this all-consuming guilt, which is strange because he did what was morally correct. He turned his own father in to the police.
Right, for his role in Project Nursery Rhyme.
Which, we should clarify, wasn't some petty crime.
No, not at all. The analysis implies it was a massive scandal, something with deep corruption, maybe even human rights issues. So Greg chose truth and justice over his own family.
And that's so tough. I mean, couldn't you argue that doing the right thing, even if it hurts, should lead to some kind of peace later on? Isn't that the reward?
And that is the exact tension the source material is exploring. The analysis suggests that, yes, his actions were ethically correct, but the price was this deep, corrosive psychological debt.
So it's not a simple good versus evil story.
Not at all. It's asking what happens when doing the right thing just completely destroys your ability to be happy. Greg is the living embodiment of that cost.
And we see that cost physically, right? The source points out he can't sleep. He's restless.
Yeah. His body is literally reflecting his mind. He's stuck in this loop, and the guilt has become this physical ailment. And what's really crucial here for his character is this upcoming transition. He's getting ready to move to the University of Stellenbosch.
So he's moving forward. On paper, at least. He's progressing.
On paper, precisely. He's achieving all this external progress, but emotionally. He is completely paralyzed, trapped by what happened.
The location changes.
But he's still anchored to that moment he betrayed his father, even if it was a justified betrayal. And that disconnect between the outward motion and the inner stillness, that's what drives his whole story.
Let's talk about one of the memories the author uses. It seems almost random at first. He's thinking about something his old rugby coach said.
Oh, yeah.
That you learn the most from the matches you lose.
This is such a great example of a layered metaphor. I mean, the sport isn't just a casual memory here.
It's more of that.
Way more. The lesson from the rugby pitch, that fairness isn't guaranteed, that you learn more from losing, it's tied directly to Greg's life. His personal tragedy feels like this huge, unavoidable loss.
So the author's basically saying that Greg's situation isn't just bad luck. It's part of some inherent injustice in the world.
Exactly. That the world doesn't just hand you happiness for being a good person. It solidifies this idea that he's in a no-win situation.
Oh, so?
Well, if he'd hidden what his father did, he would have had the moral guilt. By revealing it, He has this crushing psychological guilt. He's perpetually defeated, just like the coach's lesson implied.
And that theme of profound, unavoidable loss, it leads us straight to the family's biggest wound. Greg goes into his late brother John's bedroom, and their mother has kept it completely untouched since John's suicide.
A devastating symbol.
It really is.
It's an emotional shrine. It's the physical proof of this family's unresolved grief, and more than that, their emotional paralysis. They haven't just remembered John. They've literally frozen a moment in time.
Like a museum of their loss.
A museum of their loss, exactly. They're living around the emptiness instead of moving through it.
And being in that room triggers a specific memory for Greg. It seems nostalgic at first. He and John are bungee jumping.
And John says that chilling line.
People jump for falling, for the fear.
And that phrase, it's a perfect example of what critics call retrospective foreshadowing.
Retrospective foreshadowing.
Yeah, so at the time, it was just, a teenager being edgy, risk-taking. But now, after the suicide, that line gains this terrifying new meaning.
It becomes a clue.
It becomes a clue. It subtly hints at John's attraction to danger, maybe even a desire for some ultimate release. It recontextualizes everything.
It turns a fun memory into a warning sign.
It does. And that technique makes the past feel active, not just like a backstory. It helps you understand that this family's tragedy was probably in motion long before Greg ever had to make a choice about his father.
Let's talk about the description of the suicide itself. The analysis makes a point of how simple it is. Just finding John in bed with an empty bottle of pills next to him. No sensationalism.
And the power of that is all in the understatement. When you're describing something that deeply traumatic, great authors often pull back on the detail.
Why is that?
Because that simplicity forces your imagination, the reader's imagination, to fill in the gaps. And paradoxically, that's way more intense than if they described it graphically. It's the silence around it that's so loud.
And this moment,
Yeah.
it connects directly to one of the novel's big philosophical ideas, doesn't it?
Yeah.
About memory and erasure.
It does. The source brings up this belief, mentioned in the book, that people die 3 times.
The 3 deaths.
Right. A person dies physically, then they die when they're buried, and the third final death is when they're forgotten.
So the fear is erasure.
That's the deepest fear in this novel, the third death. The family preserves John's room because they are terrified of forgetting him, of letting his death become complete. The grief becomes a fight against oblivion.
And that explains so much about the mother, why she's kept the room that way. She's literally fighting that third death.
She is.
Speaking of her, the analysis points out how she keeps using this really powerful water imagery to describe her grief. She says losing a child is like drowning at sea.
And this is where the whole chapter just locks into place. The thematic cohesion is perfect.
Because it goes back to the beginning.
It connects directly, instantly, back to that very first image of the body in the Grand Canal. The author uses that same motif to show that this sense of drowning, of emotional collapse, is the fundamental state for this entire family.
Wow. So the theme that started so publicly in Venice ends in the most private way in the mother's own heart.
That's it, exactly. And then you get that final gut-wrenching revelation about her secret pain, her confession to Greg.
That when he was away and her husband was gone, she would close all the doors and just scream.
Screaming into a void.
It's devastating because he shows her complete isolation, this private ritual of anguish because the 2 men in her life were gone, one to prison, one to his own guilt.
She felt completely abandoned. Everyone she loved was taken from her, physically or emotionally. So by the end of chapter 1, you don't just have a broken family. You have a totally shattered one. Every single member is isolated in their own trauma and guilt. The damage is just comprehensive.
So if we take a step back, what does this kind of deep dive into just one chapter really tell us? Why is it so important to see all these layers?
It means you can't just read chapter 1 as backstory. It's not just information you need to get through. It is crucial structural content.
The blueprint.
The blueprint. When you understand how the author is using water symbolism and the foreshadowing and the setting, that's how you unlock the novel's engine. It prepares you to really get the book's whole argument about memory and justice and what it actually costs to survive. Once you see the pieces working together, the entire narrative becomes richer.
That focus on memory and the fear of that third death, of erasure, that really resonates. We see the cost of remembering, this crushing guilt that Greg carries. Which brings up a final provocative thought for you to take with you. If this whole story is built on the psychological toll of holding on to painful memories, What happens to characters who choose the other path? What is the price of trying to actively forget, of trying to erase your own trauma?
I think that's the challenge, really. The novel forces its characters and us to confront that painful balance between honoring memory and just basic emotional survival in the face of such a deep, deep loss.
A profound thought. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time.